Most oil pastels, when you buy them, are advertised as being able to be used on canvas, wood, paper, cardboard, I'm reading off a box, and all these sorts of things. Well, while there is an element of truth in there, it's not always as simple as that. Let's investigate. So as you're undoubtedly aware, there is a massive, vast difference between the cheapest oil pastels and the very good oil pastels. Say, like, on the cheaper end of a good stage, the Pastels, and on the dearer end, my favourite, the Caran d'Ache Neo pastels. So there is like this vast difference, and in between there is every form of texture, softness, smoothness, silkiness. And in the same way, there is also this vast, vast difference in the papers and the surfaces that you can use to apply your oil pastels to. So what I'm going to do here is just choose 4 or 5, maybe 6 surfaces for you to see how oil pastels react differently. I can't sit here and tell you exactly what is right for you, because what you need to do is to pair your oil pastels to your paper. Now, the only way you can do that is by experiments, and obviously you don't want to go buying loads of paper to suit the oil pastels that you have. I would prefer to put the paper to the pastels rather than the pastels to the paper, because the paper is the be-all and end-all, really. The better the paper, the better the picture you're going to get. But I have promised you and myself that when I get to 1,000 subscribers and my 4,000 watch hours, I am going to share the secrets of the paper I use. I have to be honest and say I do try different papers every now and then in between using my favourite paper, but nothing is coming anywhere near them. So at that point, I will share my favourite paper. Until then, please have a look at this, see what paper you have, see if you can suit your pastels to your paper. Let's be perfectly blunt about all this. The manufacturers state that you can use it on the glass paper, cardboard, all that sort of stuff. Yes, you can. But they, being blunt, they don't care what your artwork is like. All they need to do is to sell their oil pastels. So they're not going to give you any idea that their oil pastels will be better on a certain type of paper. They're just going to give you the impression that their oil pastels work on pretty much anything, so that you'll buy them. And when you go from the cheaper to the dearer end, you probably find they will work better on various surfaces, but still there is this problem, and it all comes down to the different textures, the different softnesses, different sizes to some degree. And you know, all they want to do is to sell oil pastels. All you want to do is turn out good artwork. They just want to sell the oil pastels. They're not bothered about your artwork. So, you know, you're going to have to spend a lot of money trying to find out what's good paper for your oil pastels, or what are good oil pastels for the particular paper you have, because you're not going to get told. The best thing they could do is say that these oil pastels can be used on various materials, but they're missing out a fundamental word, and that's well. These oil pastels can be used well on certain surfaces. So anyway, let's go and have a look at a few surfaces. I'll blend the Pastels, I'll blend the Montmartres, and we'll see which is the best out of all them, and that'll give you some idea where you might be able to go with your oil pastel paper. So what I'm going to do is to start off with a very smooth paper. This is actually an oil pastel paper made by Paul Rubens. It says excellent paper pads for oil pastel. It doesn't tell you what pastels though, does it? So you can only assume it's for their pastels. I feel it's too smooth. So we'll have a look. I'm going to start off smooth, really smooth. This is the smoothest, would you believe, although it's the proper oil pastel paper. And I'm going to progressively get more textured. And I'll let you know what each paper is as I go. So let's get the Pentel oil pastels and have a look. It's applying okay. There's no doubt about that. Of course, the oil pastels have their own texture, don't they? Now that's fine. That's fine. But as you know, you layer up. So I'm just going to find different colours to put on the top of here. So let's put a brown on top. Now, even already we're having trouble. It's applying, but it's becoming very transparent. And the reason for that is because the paper is too smooth and it will not allow for that pastel to adhere to it very well. So let's see about the blending. It just slips sliding all over the place, and it's even with a cotton bud you're getting pilling. So very smooth paper in this case is not ideal for the Pentels or a harder type pastel. Any harder type pastel, whether it's Pentels or not, doesn't really matter. I'm just using them because they're the ones I have to hand. So you can see, I hope you can see, there's a real blotchiness going on there. It's not as bad as it could be. So really on a smooth surface with a really hard pastel, one layer. Let's see the pilling. Yeah, see, it's all blotchy. You wouldn't want to do that. And if you try to blend it out with your finger, it becomes even more blotchy. So a smooth surface, albeit it's paper like they say you can use, is not good. So let's now use a softer oil pastel. Now to me, this should be even worse. So it applies great and it applies thicker. Okay, and of course this will probably be even harder when you're making a proper picture. Okay, that goes over the top. Now that would be reasonable for you to do a straightforward picture. Okay, let's blend that together. A bit of white on there. Right, if you're only looking at one layer on this smooth paper, it would be great. Because this also shows you that something like cartridge paper would not be good. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to find pretty much the same colours again. I'm going to lay it over the top. And again, you can see there's some colour going in there. And you could probably do some slight blending. But again, it's digging in. And that's because there's no texture there to adhere to. Smoothing out not too bad. But it's not ideal. So with a softer paper, I'm going to, there's a tiny bit of pilling going on there. As the more you do this, the more it's going to pill. But I'd say with a smoother paper, a softer pastel would be ideal. So if you went out and bought the Pentel oil pastels or similar, I'm just using Pentel as a guide, then it's not going to adhere to this smoother paper. But the implication was, in all oil pastels, that it will apply to anything. So that said, I think the fact that if you wanted to apply it to glass might cause a problem, because that's pretty damn smooth, isn't it? So there you go, that's that one. That's a really smooth pastel paper. Let's go on to the next smoothest. Right, you've got two sides to this. This is Canson Métillance. Right, so I'm going to use the smooth side first because it's a little bit more textured than what I've just been using. So you can feel that's going on there much better because there's some grab to it. And you can see some texture through the paper. So that's good. I don't think we're going to get far though. Blending over the top. Coming back for the second layer, so to speak. Let's try blending that down. Well, it's crying out for another layer. because the paper is showing through, and we don't always want that. Sometimes we do, of course, but it's getting a bit blotchy already. Let's put this brown on top. The brown is adhering lovely, it's layering really quite nice. Let's blend that, get a nice soft transition. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's a more textured paper. It's not great, and it could be worse. Now let's go for another colour. Let's go for a blue over the top of this and see if that adheres. Yes, it's adhering. It's getting harder to adhere though. So I think that's probably as far as we could go. So we're looking 3 to 4 layers of light in the air. Now it's pulling off now. It's pulling the blue off and just showing the brown underneath. So albeit that is far better, it's still not great. It's too smooth for a harder pastel. And again, it doesn't blend very well with the fingers. So let's look at the smoother pastel again. The softer pastel again. That's going on a lot better and a lot thicker, which you'd expect. Yeah, nice. Going back for a second layer, there we go. Alright, let's just blend them in. That's much, much better. Again, by the same context with the really smooth paper, this is, again, better. Let's now put a brown over the top like we did. That's going on much better. You can see it's more vivid. Just give it a tiny bit of a blend just to show that's where it is. And now let's go back on with a blue like we were. The blue's going over better than what the other one did because it's a smoother pastel, but not fantastic. And you can blend it out and still see the blue. Let's put a Montmartre slightly harder pastel onto this just to see what it does. It goes on better down there where there's only one layer, but it's not fantastic. You know, it's not what I'd want. It's okay. I'd use it if I had to, and that's with a little bit of texture and not too much pilling going on, so that's not bad. There's a little, and the more you do this, the more it will pill. Okay, so you can see the difference there. The difference is obviously the difference in the pastels, but the paper's making a big difference as well. So what I'm going to do now is to go on to the back of this paper because it's got a slightly different and thicker texture. Let me just do this one quickly. Now, this is okay if you like to see that texture. Personally, I don't. I strongly dislike it. You blend it down. It's with the Pentel, it's looking as if it's going to take a few more layers from here. So the back side of the paper is obviously a little bit better. Let's now go for the brown. That's going on a lot better. So the textured side is better. And that literally is because of the texture. And go on with the blue. And again, you've reached that saturation point. Now, all you will do is dig the pastel into the paper and you'll end up with all this blotchiness. So, albeit it's a more textured paper with this honeycomb effect, it's not going to give you what you want. So you can't get too much on there. Let's go to an entirely different paper now. This is a aqua blend paper by Claire Fontaine. Now, my perception is this is going to work really good. It's not too different to what I normally use. You can feel it's going on a lot better. And there's still plenty of texture there to be used by the look of that. So I'm going to go back over there, 2, 3 layers, 4 layers. I'll do the same with this other purple, or blue I should say at this point. Certainly taking a lot more pastel, and let's blend that down to see what happens. Yeah, you're blending it down and it feels as if it could take a lot more. Let's put the brown over it. That's going on a treat, and this is with the harder pastels. Blend that in. It's going in a lot nicer. You can feel it's getting thicker. The pastel is getting thicker, but there's still texture showing through. Now let's go on with this blue. We'll follow the same procedure as we have done. That blue's going on great. But again, it's got to that point where it's skipping across the texture of the paper with a harder pastel, and it's showing blotches. But it's blending okay. Let's see if we can put a lighter colour over the top. Not with a massive success, but you can layer up a few more. You're starting to get into the areas of muddiness, and you are starting to cover the texture of the paper a bit better. But it's still not fantastic, because you get to see the texture of the paper. Let's put these soft ones on. These are the Montmartre, if you remember. It's going on great. In fact, I'm going to put another layer on. This is how I would generally layer up if I had to. Of course, the other thing is that that I haven't mentioned as yet is that the transparency of the pastels also makes a big difference. And these pastels have got a bit of transparency to them. Not lots, but a bit. Especially when they layer over the texture of the paper, you can see the paper through. Having said that, I'm now blending it out, and we're getting a fantastic blend with a softer pastel. This isn't an ultimately soft pastel, but it's more along the lines of the Mugnos and, well, I say the Caran d'Ache, but not the quality. So let's just put a brown on top. That's going on great. I mean, really, you shouldn't need to go any further than this, so no matter what, you could get pictures, but it's all about how you apply them. And that's looking a lot clearer, isn't it? Put the blue on top like we did before. And again, that blue is looking a lot clearer as well. So the slightly softer pastel is adhering to this more textured watercolour paper than what anything else has. You can see, I hope, all the way through how things are getting better, going from smooth to soft. So there's that one, is the really smooth oil pastel paper, and then there's that one, which is the Canson Métillance, and the textured side, and then we've got this, which is quite a, it's got some texture to it, but it's not the most textured in the world. So what I'm going to do now is to bring in the same type of paper, but with a completely different texture to it. This is really a rough texture. Hopefully you can see the difference between this texture and that texture. This is more like a, if you like a wallpaper, but not as rough. So we'll take that one away. It's the same paper, but more textured, and we'll see what goes on here. Bits on it. And we're putting that on. Now, it does depend on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve an impasto type of painting, then rougher papers are the way to go for definite. If you want something with more detail and more refined lines, then a slightly smoother paper, but not too smooth, is the way to go. So this is a rougher paper. You would find it hard to get detail on this. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures where I've used a rougher paper and a slightly smoother paper and then a proper oil pastel paper. Right, so let's put another layer on. You can see it's quite hard to fill the texture of this paper, but all the bumps are getting filled in. So that does make a difference. You should be able to keep adding. This is Pastels again, which don't normally layer up too far. This would be about as far as you could go. You can see on this rougher paper it's actually helping. So on a smoother paper the Pastels or a harder pastel is not really reacting, but on a rougher paper it is. You can see it's a lot more vibrant now. And I'll just put the blue in here while I'm here. The blue will layer again as well, but not that good. So we've got up to about the same amount of layers, but it's filled in a lot better. So for the harder pastel, the rougher paper is done the trick. Now let's see with the softer pastels. It's taken off a lot of pastel, you can see. Actually, the Pastels had an extra layer, didn't they? So you actually get an extra layer from the Pastels when used on a rougher paper. Again, I'm doing a second layer, really thickening it in there, like an oil painting texture, if you like, nearly. And this is going lovely. Again, I'm going to blend this, and that's actually quite nice. So a softer oil pastel on a really rough paper gives you really quite a nice look. I love this up here, it's nice. So let's see if we can just add in a blue layer on top. Yes, we can. Still plenty of texture there. And a brown layer on top of that. Yes, we can. So that all said, you can see the impasto look coming out now, where you're pushing hard, and that will blend softly. The conclusion so far is that a smoother paper, despite what you're told on the tins and in the adverts, does not let oil pastel adhere to it that great. So don't be fooled into thinking that you can use it on anything. But when you get to a more textured paper, both the hard and the softer pastel are actually beginning to adhere, and there's not so much pilling going on, especially in the softer pastel. That's lovely. That really is nice. If you were using that in a painting, you could actually really come up with some nice stuff with that. So that's a really rough paper. So my thoughts so far are, use a rougher paper. I think pastel matte would be very good for the Pastels and the harder type pastels. Ones where you don't really need too much of a blend. Ones where the paper won't allow you to blend that much. So, but the smoother papers, no. Smoother papers are okay for 1 or 2 layers, but from then on, a waste of time. So here I have a canvas. Let's have a look at this. You would think this would be awesome. But there is a problem with a canvas. It's very slippery. And that does not lend itself to detail, if that's what you're looking for. And it does not lend itself to adherence either. So there we go, there's one layer. It also peels off quite easy off a canvas. It's not to say you can't use a canvas. At the painting I'm using at the moment, I'm using a canvas. But it proves more difficult. And with a harder pastel, it's just not doing hardly anything that you'd want. It's made it very transparent, even though it isn't. And it's pulling off when I'm using the cotton bud. You can see that there, look. I'm not even pressing hard. And yeah, it's not great. It's just slippery. It's just like a slippery surface. So for a harder oil pastel company to say you can use it on a canvas, well, I'm saying no, you can't. Let's have a look at the softer pastels. See, that's going on a lot better. Again, it's made it look transparent though. And again, it is very slippery. Canvas is nice to use an oil pastel on. But like I say, there are offsets to that, in that it becomes more difficult. A softer pastel is definitely the way to go by the look of this. Well, I knew that anyway. I used Caran d'Ache on a small, very, very textured canvas, and it was brilliant. And I used the Del Greens. The Del Greens were superb, and they are very soft. So these soft pastels that I've got here actually have a little bit of hardness to them. Sounds counterintuitive, but that's the Montmartre for you. But I'm using them just as a standard rather than a finished idea. So they're going on a lot better, look. So, and you can smooth them out with your fingers. Not great, but much, much better. So I'm saying with a canvas, even though it's more textured than a smoother paper, Pastels, not just Pastels, but other hard pastels are not going to work on a canvas very well. But a softer pastel, this is the hardest version of soft that I've ever seen, but it will work better, especially the softer you get. But then you are limited to details. That's a few suggestions on paper and what to use, and I hope that's been worth your while.